Hey, it's Louis Max. Russ McMahon, the urban adventure traveler, is quite a character. Listen to him tell his stories about taking the Trans Siberian Railway, spending New Year's Eve in Prague with a virtual stranger, and filming a documentary on the streets of Havana, Cuba. Interesting stuff. Enjoy.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
What up, son? What up? Grind and Pivot, Louis Max. Today, we have the original urban adventure traveler, Russell Lopi Spanky Maximilian Felipe Bouchard McMahon. My brother, how you doing, baby?
I'm doing good, Louis. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's nice to be part of your new project. Congratulations, man.
Great to hear you over here. So we know each other for about 30 years, but probably only seen each other maybe in person, I don't know, half a dozen times, not even.
Yeah, I think a half a dozen, maybe 8 times in 29 years, and all of those times have been probably for maybe 12 hours a shot at the most.
Yeah, definitely. So tell the people really who you are, where you're from, and tell us the story also of how we met. Kind of bring people up to speed.
Yeah, and I was working at St. Bon. This is how we met, Louis. I was working at St. Bonaventure University in Olean, great school, and I had just started. That position had been empty for a while, so when I got to my desk, I was going through all the mail that was intended for the assistant director of development. That was my job, and I came across an envelope, and it was from Freeform Enterprises out of Bayside, Queens. And I opened it up, and there was a letter, and it was a letter marketing things that promotional items.
Trying to sell you some shit, huh?
Yeah, and but the letter, as I'm reading it, the letter is very well written. It's talking about penetrating markets and all of this. And I got to the bottom, and it said Louis Max, and I looked at that, and I said to myself, no, nobody's name is Louis Max. So I said, hell, I'm going to call him. So I called you, and you had that heavy accent. Of course, I hear it, but that heavy accent, and you were off to the races, man. You were off to the races, and we never shut down for 29 years after that first phone call.
That's absolutely right. And I remember pretty much the same way. And I just remember having some great phone conversations with you. And I don't even know if you really had the need for the stuff I was selling, which was, the promotional items, pins, key rings. But I think you figured out a way, let me try to spend some money. Let me try to buy some things. But I remember us just having a lot of laughs right from the beginning.
And I needed your products. Long and short is, in the fundraising business, you have kind of giveaways and that sort of thing. So I had to buy them from somebody. And over the years, I knew that one phone call and I'd get my stuff. And we bought a lot of funny stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Along the way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think also there's probably about a couple of hundred pieces of brass somewhere in the ground somewhere after it was being tossed. But we won't we won't name any names. How you making out with the coronavirus out there? You're living in Klamath Falls, Oregon now, so
right. Yeah, and people have been very respectful of separating and social distancing. People are getting a little antsy now. I think we have 26, 27 cases, and fortunately, everyone so far has pulled through. So, I guess for the size of our town, we're 30,000 people here, and it's pretty easy to to distance and social distancing here. So, but I think that, in Oregon and even down here, people are anxious to kind of try to crack this thing open and do a little commerce. So, that's where we are compared to you folks out there in New York, Louis. I think our heart goes out to all of you. You're just getting hammered. And so, we wish you well. We wish everyone back on the East Coast. We wish you well.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, we're definitely getting hammered here. So, Spanky, you've had many stops in the U.S. working and living along the way, and give us an idea. Take us geographically through how you ultimately made it out to Klamath Falls, Oregon, and the beautiful Cascade Mountains. I know you were born in Iowa, but I'm not sure. I forget what city. So maybe fill us in and start us off on your trip.
Sure. Yeah, I've been blessed to be able to find work in some great institutions around the United States. So, born and raised in a town called Farragut, Iowa, southwest part of the state. Um, a population of 511, and it seemed like as a kid, the population stayed the same. People moved in, people moved out, but the sign always said 511, and I didn't realize until later that the sign painter was just lazy and never wanted to change it. So, but it was remained a very very small population, farming community, and that's what I think. One thing I got out of that was very hardworking community, and I learned, the advantages or the meaning of having a good work ethic. Everybody worked hard. They worked smart. And it was instilled in all the kids. Everybody was doing farm work. Women were doing detasseling. Men were throwing hay bales. You just knew you needed to work, and it wasn't a big deal. I also grew up like Opie Taylor, swimming in the creek and fishing in the creek, and that sort of thing. So that was it was a good place to hang my hat the first 18 years. Then I went away to Kansas Wesleyan University. This was kind of a big thing, a watershed moment. Little liberal arts college in Salina, Kansas. I went from, like I say, throwing hay bales and weeding beans and wearing madras shorts and penny loafers to protesting the Vietnam War in 2 months and wearing bell bottoms. So culturally, that was a big shock, a big movement in my progression as just a thoughtful human being. Then got married, went down to San Antonio, Texas, great town. Worked at Incarnate Word College. It was a Catholic school. It was run by the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word, and they were based out of Ireland. From then, it was a whirlwind trip, and I came up to your area. I moved to Mount Vernon. You're familiar with Mount Vernon.
Very much so. Shout out Mount Vernon. My dog was actually in a shelter in Mount Vernon. I got her. Love Mount Vernon.
Yeah, money yearning Mount Vernon. Heavy D and the boys.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
Way to go.
They were rattling around there when I was
Word, my nephew, word.
Yeah. So then I worked at SUNY at Purchase, flagship performing arts school of the SUNY system.
Right. What'd you actually do there? I know. Yeah, that was a great super duper liberal arts school. Fantastic music program. What capacity did you work there?
I was assistant director of admissions and director of dance admissions. So I would go to all of the dance auditions, and I would check on their academics because SUNY Purchase, they required some pretty good marks coming out of high school when they were, comparing it against the talent of the dancers coming in.
Yeah, it was tough. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and and I did some advising, to some of the dancers on courses to take and that sort of thing. Then I moved into Manhattan to work for a corporate headhunter, and I moved into another neighborhood you're familiar with is West 112th and Broadway.
Uptown, absolutely.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah.
Right. Well, what year was this? What year was this when you moved uptown?
This would have been 2004. No, 1984.
1984.
This was 1984.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mid 80s. Gotcha.
I would step out of my building, look to my left, and a block and a half away was the front of St. John the Divine, the church. Round the corner was the West End Jazz Club. Half a block from me was Moon Palace, a great Chinese restaurant, and I think we may have talked about it, but another half a block away, I'd walk by it 10 times a day, was the famous facade of the coffee shop from Seinfeld.
Right. You mentioned
Uh,
that.
you- yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Columbia University was there,
Sure.
Riverside Church. So great place to to hang out.
Yeah.
Then from New York, uh, I got a divorce, and I ended up going to Western New York, a place called Chautauqua Institution, and that place in itself, and I think you're familiar with it. It is a hotbed of creativity. Major lecture circuit. They have an opera company, dance company, three orchestras, theater, visual arts. It was just a mecca for people that wanted to expand their horizons on any number of subjects. And you had young people pouring in there to be in the opera company. All of the performing arts divisions that they had there. So, and that was a watershed moment there that we can talk about later. From there, went to St. Bonaventure University.
Ah, the good old Saint Bonnie. Absolutely.
That's right, home of Bob Lanier.
You know it.
So what was it, size 16 shoes?
Yeah. Exactly.
Big, big,
Right.
big. And from St. Bonaventure, went to Kansas State, and that was my first stint with a major university, and that was a good experience. Then from Kansas State, went to Interlochen Center for the Arts. So fortunate to have that experience. I was there 8.5 years, and that's a performing arts high school and one of the largest performing arts camps in the country. I mean, they'd have I think like 2,000 kids pour through there over the course of the summer.
Right. Yeah. Big summer program
Yeah.
from what I know. Yeah. Now you kind of following the roots of liberal arts, creative, performing, because I see from Chautauqua it was the kind of thing. What was your process in getting a job, let's say, in Interlaken, and also really go back to Chautauqua? I mean, did you have a headhunter? Did you venture out and say this is kind of where I want to be? What was the driver for you to
Oh,
go to
yeah.
these
And
institutions?
it was just dumb luck, serendipity, and just good karma. I know people says karma is karma and it's not good or bad, but anyway, I was just coming off of a divorce and I was kind of licking my wounds, and I got a call out of nowhere from Dr. Dan Bratton. Dr. Dan Bratton was a friend of mine that I worked with at Kansas Wesleyan University, and he had just been named president of Chautauqua, and he said, "Why don't you come and work for me for a year? We have a spot open. Need you to come here in the next 30 days. If you do well and we like you, you can stay. And if you don't like it and you want to leave, you can leave after a year. But let's see if we can take a run at this thing for a year." So I went up to Chautauqua, and talk about pivotal moments that changed everything.
Yeah,
That was it.
really.
That may have been the leading one. Um, I mean, I can't get into all of it, but that was the one that opened my eyes up to a whole new world of expanding the way you look at things. I mean, I was meeting famous people, and I was in I was in two operas as a supernumerary, uh, lecture circuits, seeing a lot of bright young people, and so I was there 4 years, and I probably, you know, added 10 years to my education just being there for 4 years. It was a fabulous place. And Chautauqua was the one that gave me my first opportunity to go to the Soviet Union. We call it Russia now, but to the Soviet Union in 1988. Huge moment.
Yeah, we're gonna get back. That's really what I wanted to talk to you about as well.
Sure.
So you were in Interlaken, and then from Interlaken you made yourself you went a little further west again, and where was
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and that was Oregon Tech in Klamath Falls, and
Go
that's where we
Owls!
are
Go
today.
Owls!
Yeah, yeah, and it was a great place to finish off my career as a professional fundraiser. I got to work for the athletic department, and we have and it's a little NAIA school, but we have, I was part and parcel, just as an administrator, to three NAIA national basketball championships under the guidance of Danny Miles. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Right. Yeah, he was an excellent coach. He had a how many wins did he end up having?
Yeah, I think he had 1,000
Right.
and let's say he's got 1,020,
Yeah.
something like.
Amazing.
But I think he was the first. No, he was the second coach in the entire nation, all levels, to reach 1,000 wins. So if you do the math, you got to win a lot of games every year to hit 1,000.
Absolutely.
So real humble guy.
And a good guy, right? And a good guy as well.
Terrific guy. Very humble. He recruited great kids. Grade point average at Oregon Tech for the athletes was like 3.1, 3.2. In engineering and health related fields. So yeah, it was a jewel of a program in the NAIA.
So you landed, you retired, you landed, you're in Klamath Falls, and that's where you are now.
Yeah, I decided that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. You decided that would be a good place for you to kind of ride out and enjoy the life as you have planned.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it had everything going for it. I had a good support group. It had a kind of a thriving underground, creative community. It also had, community theater and that sort of thing. But people were just dabbling in real creative stuff all the time. And the one thing that I really appreciated, it town of 30,000, but you could do anything you want. If you wanted to do something, people would help. They would want to be a part of it. It didn't matter what art form you were working in, whether it was theater, film, music. It was just, kind of a nice place where anything goes. So that was another reason. Also a big reason, 300 days of sunshine out here.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, we have 4 seasons, but if you figure 300 days, that's like Palm Springs with 4 seasons.
Exactly.
So, so that's where I hang my hat now and base any travels and my creative projects out of here.
Great. So I found something pretty interesting just thinking about it, and after many years of talking and going back, I thought one of the great things about you were the fact that you were able to make a couple of ventures across the world, primarily Eastern Europe. And I believe you said that you were at Chautauqua, and that's when you had your first opportunity to go to the Soviet Union.
Right.
What was why there? What do you think your affinity was to that part of the world?
Oh, and it goes back. I can remember probably I was 7, 8, 9 years old. We had a black and white TV, and I remember watching, some news program in my living room, and it was showing footage of the May Day parade in Moscow in Red Square.
Ah,
I mean, and it's, for a kid and, from the cornfields to see that it's missiles and the square is beautiful and tanks and the soldiers and all of that. It was just so unbelievably, impressive. And I can remember kind of thinking, man, I'd like to go to there someday, but I didn't figure that I'd ever have the chance. But that never went away. And then just through life, I ended up at Chautauqua. Dr. Dan Bratton asked me to be part of an 11-member administrative delegation to help usher 220 U.S. citizens over to concerts and meetings in Leningrad, Moscow, and then 6 days down in Tbilisi.
wow. So Moscow to Tbilisi was basically your first trip.
Yes, by air, all by charter flights.
Wow. Right. I mean, that's normally, I think that's about a 36-hour trip normally.
Yeah. And I know the what you're talking about. So I met people on that first trip when I was working, and I went back in 1990, on my own, and that, just to visit them. And I took a train. I flew to Moscow, take a train from Moscow down to Tbilisi. And you're right, that trip normally was about 30, 36 hours. And it turned into 54, and probably one of the most exciting adventures, the out of the box type of adventures I've had in my 17 trips over to Europe.
Wow.
Yeah,
So enlighten us. Let's talk about that. And I mean, that sounds like something to really kind of delve into.
sure.
You know, start with the fact that it was, I'm assuming it was supposed to be 36. It turned into 54. That's a few hours. Yeah. Take us, get us on the train and take us.
Yeah, so and I'm traveling alone. I overpacked. I'm on I'm at the railroad station on the platform, and I know I have found the right train, but they hadn't opened the doors up. And this guy came up to me. He was short, kind of stocky, and I could tell he was Georgian. He had that that look, that Mediterranean-ish kind of darker complected. He asked me where I was going. I said Tbilisi. He says we're going there as well. He asked me to show him my ticket. He looked at it and he says, "Oh, you're in the compartment right next to mine." He says, "My name's Boris. This is my traveling friend Murat." And those guys adopted me from the time I
Wow.
stepped onto and that was a new experience of kind of international cross culture kind of automatic acceptance of travelers. That just came out. If you were traveling, then you were part of the fraternity at that moment. That people were going to talk to you, and you would band together, and whatever the trip handed out to you, you were having it. So
Hmm.
we took the train, and it goes to Rostov on the Don River. And Don River is very close to Ukraine. But we pull into Rostov, and there's an announcement over the PA, and I can't understand. It's in Russian. So I step outside my compartment, and I see people up and down the train, kind of rushing to get their bags off the train, get the bags off the train. Some of them were throwing bags out the windows. It wasn't real chaotic, but you could see something was up. So Boris came up, and he said, "Russell, here's what we have. This train is not going to go to Tbilisi." He says there's fighting. There's some rebel activity in an area that the train would have to go through, which is a little tiny country called or area of Georgia called Abkhazia. And it was a hot spot. He says the train's not going to go through there.
Yeah. I
He
got to
says,
interject for 1 second, Russell.
"Sure,
Now these guys, you meet them. I mean, you're from the U.S. I'm a New Yorker. You're not a New Yorker, but you spent plenty of time in New York. You're on your
yeah,
own. You know the ins and outs of the streets. I mean, these two guys. Did you hit you up? They start talking to you. Everything seems right. Any apprehensions?
yeah." I mean, good question. Absolutely, not once. I had experienced the internationally acclaimed hospitality of Georgians in '88. And I said, these guys have got to be straight shooters. They're Georgians. This is what they do. They're brought up to be generous of spirit and also be generous of action. So yeah, and it was kind of an instant fraternity on that train, and we all had. I'd bought vodka, and they had brought vodka. They brought brandy, and so it was a rolling party.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Fair
yeah,
enough. So the guys are. So the announcement comes over. You see people starting to bail, and you're at a crossroads here.
yeah.
What do you tell us about it?
So Boris, he said you can't go on any further. He says you got two options. He says you can get off the train here and stay in Rostov for a couple of days and see if things change down in that area so that the train can go down. He says, and Murat and I, we will get off the train with you and stay with you as long as it takes. So here again, Georgian hospitality. They said, he said, the other option you have is we can all stay on this train and we are going to go east, south and east around the Caucasus Mountains through through Chechnya down to Baku, Azerbaijan, and come into Georgia from the south. And he says, you got 10 minutes to decide.
Wow.
So I know, I mean, you know, the adrenaline was pumping.
Sure.
And I'm thinking to myself, you know, yeah, this could be a little dicey. But I said, this is why I want to travel is, you know, do I want to take a shot at this thing?
Right. Were they going?
So
No, they were going no matter what, right? They were going. What were they going to do?
no,
Was it they were going to go where you decided, or do you think?
yes, they were going to go when I decided.
So if they would have, if you just said we're staying here, they were with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's
And I'd
cool.
only known them for like a day.
Wow, that's interesting. Wow, I wonder if they were
Yeah.
planning on cutting your body up later on down the road, but obviously not. I'm only
Louis,
kidding.
you're such a-
But
you're
this is the
such
way
a
we're trained to think,
skeptic.
you know.
No, Louis, you're such a New Yorker, my brother.
It's true, right? I'm like, what are you guys crazy? But then again, you know, you're right. You knew kind of what the Georgians were like. All right, so you said, tell us what'd you decide? I don't know
Yeah,
what
and
you
he
end up.
said the other option is we can go around the Caucasus Mountains. It's going to add a lot of time to it. And so I said to him, I said, do you think this is going to be do you think there are going to be problems? And he looked at me and he had just the slightest little grin on his face. And he said, oh, probably.
Great.
And, you know, and so I kind of laughed and I said, all right, let's do this. I want to stay on the train. Let's do this. And they were overjoyed.
Nice.
I think that they had not traveled that route much either. So it was kind of a new experience for them. So we stayed on the train and we went around the Caucasus Mountains, like I say, through Grozny, Chechnya.
Jeez.
And if anybody remembers, there was tons of, you know, battles with the Russian military by Chechnyan rebels right around Grozny. It was bombed like crazy.
Yeah. What was the landscape out the windows?
Yeah, and everything it was kind of like the steppes of the Eurasian steppes of eastern Russia, but it was brown. As the further east and south you got, it almost turned into kind of high desert.
Mm-hmm.
And the Caucasus Mountains were on our right, and they were spectacular. You know, to kind of ride through. Pulled into Baku, Azerbaijan. It's on the Caspian Sea, and the train, I couldn't believe it. The train traveled right along the shore of the Caspian Sea for about 2 hours.
Jeez.
And I got to tell you, I'd learned about the Caspian Sea only, you know, from high school geography. I never ever thought that I would go there. It was such an obscure place.
Sure.
And there I was standing on a train drinking vodka, looking out at the Caspian Sea. That was heady stuff. You know, for a young guy, that was really special. Got into Baku, and we ended up being stopped for, I think it was like 3 hours in the great abandoned oil fields of Baku, and it was hundreds, if not 1,000 or more. Oil derricks and pump stations that littered the landscape that, you know, were no longer running. They pumped out all the oil. Everything was black.
So it was barren. It was basically a barren
Yes,
land. Really?
Good term. Yeah, good term. It was barren.
Right.
And and I was in there for about 3 hours, and it was just fascinating.
Did you chronicle a bit with film and pictures and anything? Did any of you take pictures back then, really?
I did have pictures, and again, that so many years ago. I still have some.
Great.
But after moving, you know, things get lost. But
Yeah.
I have pictures of Marat and Boris, of the train, of buying food on the platforms.
Love to see that.
And I may have a picture of the train station in Grozny, Chechnya. And the only one reason I remember that is about the time that I was traveling, they had just captured in Grozny and I believe at that train station one of the most notorious mass killers in the history of Russia. This guy would travel between Rostov and down to Grozny, back and forth on the train, and I'm thinking that he killed like 56 people.
Wow.
And I saw a documentary later on, and the Grozny train station popped up, and I go, shit, I've been there.
Yeah, and you saw
I've seen that.
Boris. You saw Boris
Yeah.
in that also.
So
Boris was in that documentary also, right?
who was?
Boris.
No. My man Boris and my guy Marat, they're solid. They're straight shooters.
Great.
They were very helpful. We became friends.
So you got there, you got off the train, and what was the next step? Where did you stay? What was it like? How long did you stay there?
Yeah, and you had asked it, I think, in a previous conversation. Did I ever run into any trouble where I started to sweat it?
Yeah, I
And it
remember.
was
Yeah, exactly. You're right. I basically said, right. Were you shitting in your pants at all at any time? Did anything, anything life threatening, like some like locked up abroad stuff? Yeah.
no, and yeah, it was nothing that severe, but it was an adventure. We got stopped. I think it's maybe a South Ossetia, but the train stopped for a couple hours. You never knew why a train was stopping, and I looked out the window, and there were guys with guns, no shirts. They looked a
Jesus.
little rough, but apparently they had stopped the train initially. And so Boris came in and he says, "Yeah, you need to go into your compartment and hide your documents. We'll come get you. When things die down." And it was 110 degrees in that car. The sun was just hammering it. And I remember I had a little handheld tape recorder. You remember those?
Yeah,
Those
of
little,
course,
yeah.
of course.
And I remember laying in the upper bunk, and I recorded about 15 minutes of my thoughts, what was going through my head at that point.
Oh, that's
And
platinum. That's
yeah,
platinum.
and if I and those little cassettes are only about an inch long.
Yeah.
Over the years, I'm hoping that when I get to storage, that I can find that tape, because I think I would be fascinated.
Oh, that would be fascinating. I mean, how long were you in the compartment for total?
I was going to say I was in compartment for about an hour and a half.
Right. And you were able to tape a certain amount. Wow, that would be golden. That could be a little talk, a conversation just in itself for you to figure out. Wow, that's got to be enlightening.
Yeah, and so I was in my 30s, and like 35, 36. So, I wasn't a wet behind the ear kid, but yeah, it was heady stuff.
Yeah, very.
So, and nothing came of that other than they were just looking for food, and I think people kind of gave them a little food. And we got into Tbilisi. My friends, I found my friends, and I had 6 glorious days of Georgian hospitality, doing things. And in Georgia, like you keep talking about the hospitality, when you arrive, they throw you a banquet. When you go home, they throw you a banquet. You know that if you go to Georgia, you're going to have 2 dinners in your honor. And then they smatter you with big lunches, lots of Georgian wine, which is some of the best wine on the planet. They say that winemaking may have originated in the Caucasus Mountains and the plains in Georgia, but that trip in 1990 and all that happened, that's when I realized I needed to look beyond my own comfort zone of just being a citizen of the United States. I realized that there are people like me out doing extraordinary stuff, being incredible people, and I added that to my thought process. Everything I looked at from then on was how does it affect me, and how does it help me become a citizen of the world, a global citizen. And I stopped looking so much at what about being a citizen and a good representative of of my country, but realized I wanted to be a part of this much bigger, crazy thing that was going on out there on our globe.
So that was another pivotal moment in
That
in your life when you realized that you really were expanding your horizons
Yeah,
and through this
agreed.
travel.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's not only just one. I mean, we usually ask or talk about, what was the one pivotal moment. I mean, you have several, and that's definitely one. So you were in Georgia, Tbilisi. You've learned the hospitality of these people, which is really kind of nice to hear. I know after that, I you went to the Ukraine at some point, right?
I did. I traveled with. I had a traveling companion. His name was Jack Stewart, and he unfortunately passed away. But
Oh, rest in
he
peace,
was
Jack
in.
Stewart.
Yeah, he was in his. But he was the only person that I knew that had the time and the money to do the kind of travel I wanted to do, and he was a spectacular travel companion.
Same
Um,
age or around the same age?
no, he's probably 25 years older than me.
Older.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so we had banged around Eastern Europe on three previous trips. Covered all the Baltic states, then Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey. But this one we decided we wanted to go to Ukraine. We had a contact there, so we flew into to Ukraine and met a guy that knew a guy,
Oh,
and his,
oh, oh,
and, it,
oh! You
and his
met a guy who? Oh,
that knew
so
a guy.
so you know a guy now.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Once removed,
wow,
and
that's
we all.
mm,
One of the reasons we did it was we were. This guy was able to arrange a homestay, so we stayed in Ukrainian citizens' home, um, and it was in Cherkasy, which would have been north of Ukraine.
yeah. I have to get my globe out,
Oh
Spanky.
yeah.
I got to get my globe out. I mean, I'm really, it's interesting as you speak about all these places, and anybody listening, I'm sure, get the map, get the globe out, get your atlas out, and really, because I mean, this guy's giving us a geography lesson. And I'm pretty sure that I fell asleep during this one.
So anyway, so we tour around Kiev, and then we board a hydrofoil, which is kind of a high speed boat at the time, for I think it was a 4 hour trip up the Dnieper River,
Wow.
the famous Dnieper River, up to Cherkasy. And the hydrofoil, sits on skis and it gets up on the water, and it was just like a bus. It was like a bus. There were people of varying degrees of income.
Right.
There were,
Traveling.
and there were villagers, and we would stop off in the middle of no place and let people off. So during that, and you had asked, I think, at one point if I'd ever had an embarrassing moment. This would be it.
Wow.
This would be it.
Uh-oh. Let's hear
Yeah, yeah. Put
let's
on your.
hear. I mean, are you willing to share it with the world?
I got to tell you, I haven't told it much now,
Well,
but
you might as
yeah.
well
So
tell it. You might as well tell it to the
yeah,
to the three people that are listening out there.
but it's part of my legacy.
Do it.
So somewhere along the line in Kiev, I had consumed probably some water through lemonade. I got sick, and it's called Montezuma's
Oh,
Revenge.
yes.
I think it's called the Deli Belly, the Turkish Quick Step. I mean, there are many names for,
I don't think I've ever heard of the Turkish quick step. I like that.
but there are several names. Anybody that travels, they've all had it at one time.
No
But
doubt.
it's brutal. So I got sick, and so I was laid up for 2 days in this room in my homestay house, and so I had a family that was taking care of me, but I was bad. So I finally started getting better, and we got to the point where I knew we could travel again. So Sasha, he drove up from Kiev about 3.5 hours by car to pick us up to take us back. So we get in the car, and I'm still struggling a little from my bout. So we get in the car, and there's a 2-lane bridge that across the Dnieper, and like I say, the Dnieper is very, very wide, and the traffic was slow, and we were driving along, and there was a truck in front of us that was full of chickens, and so we were driving along. Well, my gas transport system was in full swing. It was working overtime. If you get my drift. So it was a nice day, but I'm in the back. I'm still not very talkative, but
You're struggling. You're struggling.
absolutely, I'm struggling. So I did my best to quietly, release the pressure, as they say. Well, when the first one came out, I mean, it flooded the car with a bouquet, a very unpleasant bouquet. And Sasha, who's driving, he gets real animated and said, "Oh no, those chickens!" And he says, "Roll up the windows, roll up the windows." And so Jack's rolling his up.
Oh, he thought,
Sasha's
oh
rolling
my
his
God. Oh yeah. Okay.
I
Okay.
can't. Mine are permanently shut. So I had an option there. I could have said, "Hey, folks, we need to keep the windows down," or I could say, "Yeah, they're gonna wallow around in my filth with me." So I chose the latter, and my system continued to do its thing. So this odor just this closing the windows created the hot box.
Rancid.
Yes, but when they rolled up the windows and sealed things off, you created a hot box.
Oh my
So
God.
everything stayed in there. And I apologize to your female listeners. This is a guy's story. So we're going along, and Jack and Sasha are just cursing these chickens out. They can't believe that these chickens are causing this much of a problem. So we get across the bridge, and the chicken truck finally makes a turn. So the chickens are gone, but my system is still
So nothing's really,
operating.
yeah, it's not subsiding. Nothing's subsiding.
Yeah, and my system is still pumping out the jams, as we say. and Sasha's going, why does it still smell like this? The chickens are gone. The chickens are gone. Then I looked up, and Jack was looking over his shoulder at me, and Sasha was looking at me in the rearview mirror, and you could tell
They figured it
that
out.
the light bulb finally came
Holy
on,
shit. I love
and
it.
I knew, and I knew they wanted me to say something, and I had a couple options. I could either own up to it,
My bad. My bad.
or I could throw the chickens under the bus.
Right, for sure.
So they're looking at me. It's real quiet, and I finally said, "Yeah, those fucking chickens. Who would have thought?"
Excellent. Excellent.
And Sasha's looking, and he looks at me and says, "Russell, I think you chicken."
Oh, he knew. Right.
So
Right.
anyway, the embarrassing part was I had to spend the next 2 hours listening to my friends tell me what a despicable human being I was.
I love it.
And Jack Stewart never missed an opportunity to tell that story. We could be at a dinner, at a cocktail party. We could have just been meeting people at a bar, and he reveled in being able to tell that story to people that we just met and people that we knew. In hindsight, it was embarrassing, but I got to tell you, I've had a bucket worth of tears of laughter thinking about that story.
Yeah, when we used to be on the road playing with the band, we sometimes had we had a truck that had a small cab in the front, and it would be 3 people in the front. Let's just say who, it doesn't matter who it was, but 3 people in the front, and we would, guys just tighten in there, and the same thing, the windows would be closed, it'd be winter, and Corporal Rob Brock, shout out to Corporal Rob Brock. I mean, he was just nasty sometimes, and it was just the same thing. It's just, killed us, and a constant amount of laughter from this. I mean, just brutal. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but you know what? I got to give you an A+ on that. Good job.
Yeah. And the thing about fart stories is there are recorded fart stories. Aristophanes, in one of his essays, he tells a fart story. This goes back to 463 BC. Mark Twain, Geoffrey Chaucer, the name goes Shakespeare. They all refer to unpleasant moments of a gaseous
passing
nature.
wind. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
It's still funny. It's still funny.
So,
As juvenile it is, I don't know. It's definitely still funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thanks for indulging me on that story.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for indulging us. I love
much.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
And we could just know the code word is always going to be chickens.
Those fucking chickens, who would have thought?
Exactly. No, it's absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for listening to part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where Russ goes back to the city of Tbilisi and then hits the streets of Havana, Cuba to shoot a documentary.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.